Welcome back. This is Building PageKey Week 2. Today we're talking about hexagonal architecture, what, why, and how. In case you're not already familiar with what we're doing here, we're building the PageKey unit, a small, local, understandable cloud alternative, because our technology today is opaque and centralized. One of the big reasons for doing this and making this post is education is key. I think that the more we educate ourselves and other people, the better off we are. And the goal of these posts is, of course, consistency, not perfection, which is why it's in a very rough state, but I hope you enjoy anyway. So something useful for you might be understanding hexagonal architecture. It is a way to develop flexible and extensible systems. It separates business logic from implementation, and core logic is isolated away from frameworks and adapters. So the core logic of whatever you're doing doesn't change even if you change how you're implementing it in the real world. Here's a diagram I made of hexagonal architecture. You can see in the middle, the domain is all of the classes about your specific problem where you model it using object classes that don't depend on anything. And then you create ports. Those ports are basically abstract interfaces that depend on those domain classes that you created, those domain objects. They depend here, so you see the dependency coming in. Those ports don't specify how to do it. They just specify a contract for getting done, what your application gets done, big picture. Then you plug in adapters to those ports. In other words, you write implementations for those abstract classes. If you are familiar with design principles, solid principles, object-oriented programming, this takes things one level up from thinking about components, and it's actually operating at the system level. So it's a system level design pattern, also known as ports and adapters, and it splits your app into what we just talked about: domain, the core logic, interfaces or ports, in and out ports, we'll see that soon, and adapters, which are the concrete implementations. So the domain's at the center and knows nothing about the way that it's implemented. Adapters adapt to that domain. Let's think about an example. And this is where we get into imports versus outports. So if we're defining ports for a email application of some sort, your imports define what that application can do for the user of that application. So the import, send an email, say that that's one thing that your app can do. The outports are the tools that it uses to accomplish that task. So you'll need a message sender and a message log. Now these ports, their implementation can be a lot of different things. For the sender, you can use SMTP directly. You can connect to AWS and let them send the email on your behalf. It doesn't matter. And if you want to change it later, it's easy to do without changing the core business logic of your app. So why bother using this thing? Adapters change more often than business logic typically. So if you want to swap out which database you're using, which APIs you connect to, which user interface you're using, you can do it without changing the core logic of your application. It keeps the business rules completely separate from all those things, which makes them readable and testable. And since those core pieces of logic don't depend on anything, you don't get locked into a specific framework or vendor. As we saw in the diagram, dependencies always point inward towards that core domain that is unchanging. So what are some concrete steps to getting this done? Well, if you're going to apply this to a problem, start by defining the domain, which will involve modeling your problem using classes that don't depend on anything. So you can model your use cases and logic at a very high level. Then you'll define ports, which are the contracts for anything that you interface with. So the imports are saying, hey, we're going to provide this as a service for people to use. Sorry, service is an overloaded word, but we're going to provide this to the user. And then the outports are, these are the tools we need to get it done. You can test the domain without doing any real adapter implementations. You can use unit tests, test-driven development, and you can write really quick and dirty in-memory adapters to satisfy those ports before getting into the details of how they would work when things are deployed to like a real environment. Then after all that, you can go implement the adapters for the database, file system, HTTP, command line interface, all that stuff. And finally add the composition root, which is the CLI or the service or the job runner that wires everything together and actually invokes everything. So it takes all the imports, the adapters, your domain, instantiates all of it, puts them all together, composes them, and actually hits run. So that's a really important part. Something useful might be a stretch for this topic, but this week I thought it was interesting to think through off-grid finance. What if your town was forming its own economy and you had no banks, no Amazon, no US dollars? What is the deal here? I would recommend reading the blog post that I did on this because it goes into more detail and I might have trouble explaining this. But basically, I thought it was interesting that you can boil an economy down to the problem of coordination. It's not money. Money is a tool to accomplish that coordination and the exchange of goods and services. So an economy, if you were to boil it down, one way to think of it is that it needs two things: shared state, people basically track how much money they have, account balances, or, it could be simpler too, agreed upon state changes. Those are the transaction rules. So if you have those two things, we certainly have that with, if you're using your credit card or if you're using dollars to pay someone, we have that. But I'm thinking, how can we boil it down even further? What if you had a small group of people? Well, if you're just bartering, your human memory might be sufficient. But of course, that has quick limitations. If you have a ledger, that satisfies coordination, and it's much easier to keep track of. Instead of everyone remembering, I gave you bread and milk, you have to give me something else, then you just write it on the ledger. I originally thought that Bitcoin would be an interesting choice for that sort of situation, a bunch of people just cutting themselves off from the rest of the world. But it's optimized for low trust environments, so it's really not the best choice. If you have small, high trust groups of people, the real constraint there is not the fact that they don't trust each other or that they need some fancy computerized system. It's really human memory and effort. So shared ledgers are probably the simplest way to solve that problem, and it shifts burden away from remembering things to a process that everyone agrees that you follow. And a couple examples of shared ledgers: it could be a town-wide paper that everyone can see in the town square, and maybe multiple copies of it, and people have to copy things down and compare and make sure that everybody agrees that the ledger is what it is. Or it could just be like an email chain. I was just surprised as I was looking into this to find out how many different ways you can implement a ledger, and it's simple and it works. Anyway, the whole point of learning about this at all is just because if we understand our economy, if we understand how these systems that we use every day work, and if we build them ourselves as an example, as a thought experiment, we understand them more deeply, we can improve them, and we can improve the world as a result, which is exciting. This week I worked on a Python prototype of Hex, which I'll talk about soon. I sketched out file store and container apps for that Hex application and wrote and recorded this video. Next, I need to really nail down that Hex Python MVP, the test cases, the things that it needs to do, and then go re-implement it in Golang using those same integration tests that I write for the MVP. And then I can integrate Hex into the PageKey unit because it really needs it at the very core. Rewrite the existing unit apps to use Hex, and then I can demo it hopefully using Hex at the core. Buckle up. It's time for a freeform ramble. We have lots of stuff on the plate today. First of all, what is this Hex thing that I'm talking about? Well, it's intended to be a universal object runtime. So lots of programming languages allow you to do object-oriented programming, but I'm thinking, hear me out, what if objects were higher level, independent of a programming language? They were just plain text files with snippets of code attached, or they call other objects. And we can have this object-based modeling where you can visualize it and see it, and regular people can just dive in as deep as they want to. That's the idea. There's a clear trade-off here because obviously this is probably going to be much less efficient than just compiling everything into one program and doing it that way. But I'm putting a heavy emphasis on clear and understandable is better than efficiency for this particular use case. And the use case is regular people who want to have more control over their programming. I'm betting, my bet is that regular people would take a performance hit if they can see deeply what their computers are doing and have autonomy over changing it and, just being part of the process. So we'll see if that pays off. Part of why I'm creating these videos is not to be entertaining, because they're certainly not, but to get myself away from the mindset of hiding what I'm working on, because I think obviously I'm trying to make something happen. It might completely crash and burn, and then all of my efforts will be wasted. My big worry that I keep coming back to is if I flesh these ideas out and put them out in the world, someone might scoop them up and go build a business exactly like mine, and then I'm just out of luck. But a couple things. I think, first of all, balancing that transparency is a challenge that I'll have to figure out. But I think sharing knowledge builds trust and improves tech for everyone. So even if someone goes and does this and builds their own business, first of all, they can't stop me from doing it. Myself, even if it's not profitable, I can still try. Second of all, I think if the business doesn't work out, at least I'm putting something maybe useful out there and capturing the process. Yes. So I can't build a business about being open without being open myself. So what happened to the PageKey unit? Never really demoed it, did I? Well, I'd like to soon. Mini PC costs are rising though, so I'm wondering if a higher end thing would be better. I was originally thinking it would be something small and super cheap, and people can buy a bunch of them if they want to and outfit their house with all sorts of different doohickeys and things that they do. And the prototype that I was building was just a mini PC with enhanced software. Started out with a Raspberry Pi, found out it wasn't powerful enough for what I wanted it to do. upgraded to mini PC, but they're getting pretty expensive. Maybe I'll start higher end. I think, Tesla used this business strategy, so maybe I can use it too. And then eventually go mass market. I don't know. I don't know anything about this stuff, but maybe the future could be delivering a full bill of materials with the unit so that you can see exactly what parts are in there and the supply chain behind how those parts were sourced and all that stuff. I'm sure that that's something that's pretty proprietary for most companies, and they want to protect that because that keeps them in business. But I'm wondering, just as a thought experiment, what if you gave that information to the consumer? Would they find it useful, or would it just undermine you and give away information to your competition? I don't know. We'll see. But of course, we're targeting people who want to own their machines and understand as much as possible about it, not rent software from the cloud, not pay a subscription fee. They want to know how it works and do it themselves. So let's end cloud dependence and start the golden age of self-hosting. I know we can get there. Reminder of some of the first applications that I think this is going to be able to do. Web hosting, already checked that box. The PageKey.io website that you see right now, as of January 2026, is hosted on a PageKey unit, so you can run your business websites on there, any static site. Next, I think it's really important to get local LLMs so you can have private ChatGPT-like systems and you can play around with them, learn how LLMs work, and not have to worry about someone looking over your shoulder as you're interacting with these systems, because they're useful, but the cost of using them, even if they're free, is giving away your data. So business automation, Zapier, you can automate things and plug in APIs here and there and do business automation, send an email if you have this rule or that rule. I'd like to systematically go to small businesses, figure out what sorts of subscriptions they're paying for, and try to replace them, or provide a tool that is flexible enough that people can figure out how to do it themselves. And then I think research could be interesting. Scientists and engineers, what if they had a cool way to track experiments, document what they found, and share knowledge? Kind of like what I'm doing with this weekly post thing. How do we streamline this process? Why does it take me so long to do it? Could it be easier and quicker? Maybe. Scary tech, scary things that happen when we centralize all of our technology in one place without getting too dramatic. There is a post about how data centers consume a lot of water and energy, and some people turn on their faucet one day when the data center is built nearby and nothing comes out, or it's very sediment-filled water, so that's not good. Brain reading implants are a thing that exists, so it's a little scary. It scares me a bit. Why do I bring it up? When people see things like this, it's cool. It could lead to good things, but also people feel that control leaving their lives, and they're giving up control to these big entities that they don't understand or have any say in the governance of. So it's scary. And so I think that this product that I'm trying to build could empower individuals, could bring back some of the control that we've given up, and lead to smiles and happiness. A key word that I see in the news a lot now is systemic. People describe problems as systemic, this or that. It's systemic. And that's probably true. I'm not great at politics or social science or anything like that. But here's an idea. If we could come up with a way to document how these big systems work, then you can inspect those systems, you can gather data from those systems, and you can make it much more transparent. Not only can you run and tune these systems much more easily and model them, if people could just install it themselves and do simulations and modeling, scientists don't have to go through all the effort of collecting data. They can just check things out, and that's it. Very hand-wavy explanation. Maybe you get what I'm saying. Thanks for watching. Still figuring out the format here. Appreciate your patience and hope to show you more soon. So you can subscribe on YouTube or sign up for the email list, and I'll send an email out every once in a while and keep you in the loop. And keep in mind, transparency and individual control may or may not lead to better systems for everyone. I think it will. So thanks for watching.